I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good one. Good for grounding. I'm recording already.
Perfect. We entered the time portal, baby, where just time is
Yeah.
illusory. It doesn't exist.
Welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast to help you show up, speak out, and be seen within your relationships, your work, and most importantly, with the relationship with yourself. In this podcast, we talk about all things self-love, relationships, sexuality, spirituality, and more. Hi, I'm your host, Celia Antonio, and I'm a women's sexuality and self-love coach, a mindfulness expert, and your cheerleader for your most grounded and expansive self-expression. You can connect with me on Instagram at self-expressedbabe, and for all of my guest episodes, there will always be links in the show notes so that you can find them online. I give my deepest thanks to you for being here and spending your precious time with me today. Now let's begin our journey. Yeah, which is this overcast weather is rare for us.
I bet it's nice though. It's a bit of a reprieve. I don't know. Or maybe not.
It is nice because the mountains, I live right next to the mountains. The mountains here are usually brown, but it's been raining so much that when you drive, like even when you look out the window, the mountains are green. And when you drive on the freeway and parts where it's mountainous, it's green instead of brown. And for those of us that
That's
notice
nice.
those things, we're like, wow, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. I didn't realize I was a mountain girly until I moved here and I'm surrounded. So kind of live in a bowl of mountains
Oh,
and
that's beautiful. Yeah.
I'm obsessed. Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. I
So
love them.
nice.
I grew up by the beach, so I always thought I was a beach girl. And then I moved to Connecticut when I was in my mid 20s. And going to the mountains and the forest there and just being in nature that was so untouched compared to the beach was just magical. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
okay. I'm not a beach girl. I'm a this girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you born in California?
I was actually born in Germany, but my mom and I moved to Los Angeles when I was 3. I think that's where my mother wound starts. My mom and I moved when I was 3,
When
and
you moved?
yeah, and my mom got remarried, and she didn't tell me, like, she wasn't openly communicative about like who my dad was, that he was still back in Germany. And when you're 3, which I obviously didn't know at the time because I was 3, but since then I've worked in a daycare. A 3-year-old knows who their father is, even if they can't speak full sentences. They know who mom is, they know who dad is. So that for me is like where my mother wound
Mm.
started. It started so young, that like betrayal of trust. So I'm so excited to talk to you
Mm.
today because like the mother wound has been like one of the biggest things I've worked on in my personal life. So, I'm going to read off your bio to introduce you. And for people who are
Mhm.
already listening, we've already gotten
Okay.
started, but welcome to Openly Spoken, the podcast that helps you show up, speak out, and be seen. Today's guest is Michaila Tyson. I'm so excited to have you today. Michaela is a mother wound alchemist and a relationship coach, and she's been researching shame and vulnerability for the past decade and has helped thousands of women transform their relationship to self. Informed by a decade of research and personal experiences, she focuses on what she calls your story and how that influences attachment styles, relational safety, emotional intelligence, and our ability to trust. Such big things that, like, when you realize it's tied to the mother wound, you're like, oh. And yeah, so these things are the key ingredients to fulfilling relationships. And a primary focus in Michaela's work is how the relationship to our mothers impacts our relational blueprint and contributes to a deep sense of not enoughness. Thank you for being here.
Mm. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. So, this is such a huge
Mm.
topic. I'm not sure where to begin, but a question that came to me as I was brushing my teeth this morning, because I know you're a mother
Mhm.
yourself. I was wondering if your own mother wound ever made you like question, should I not have kids? Or like, will I not be a good mom?
Mm. It's a really great question. For me personally, I would have said that so my daughter's 9, she's 10 this year, so I've been a mum for a long time now. And I was 23 when I had Neve.
Hmm.
And if you'd have asked me beforehand, I would have said, I'm not very maternal. That described myself. I'm not very maternal. Um, I never kind of imagined that I wouldn't have kids, but it was definitely a later in life thing
Mm. Uh-huh.
for me.
Yeah.
And then the universe intervened and I fell pregnant at 23. But it has greatly influenced my kind of story around being a mother, and
I
not
bet.
feeling equipped to be a mother has definitely played a huge part. Um,
Hmm.
and I know a lot of conversations that I have with women not wanting children because of this deep fear of repeating history is really prominent. Like it's a big fear of so many women.
Hmm.
And I had that too.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I have that too. But what's
Yeah.
interesting is like if we
Yeah.
have the fear, like we're probably already self-aware enough to not repeat that story because we're aware of it. And um, I can't speak for all mothers, but I know that the way my mom was, she did her best. It's not like she was on purpose trying to give me a mother wound, you know? But we live in an age where we have so much more information at our fingertips that we can even be aware that certain things are not okay, or even be aware that, our relationship with our mom is our very first relationship, and to be aware that that sets a kind of tone for the rest of our relationships moving forward. I don't think previous generations knew that. And if they did, you only knew that if you came across it in like a class or in a book, like, because there wasn't the internet back then, it wasn't something that was so readily available.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even, for as long as I remember as a little girl, I had like definite anxiety and there was no name for it. It was
Yes.
just
Yes.
Michaela's a worrier and Michaela overthinks things. And that
Yeah.
very much became my identity. It wasn't until I grew up that I was like, oh my God, holy shit, I have high function anxiety. And that
Same.
like I said, there was no name for it.
Yeah, for me, I just thought it was normal to be like that because both my parents also have high
Yeah.
functioning anxiety. And I honestly didn't know I had anxiety until the pandemic happened. Like right before the pandemic,
Mm,
I found myself in a situation where like I had so much on my schedule because I was saying yes to everything and yes to everyone. And then the pandemic was kind of like my excuse to cancel everything. And I was like, oh, thank God. And
mm.
that was I was engaged already to my husband at the time, and when I was sharing with him how I felt, he's like, "That sounds like anxiety." And I'm like, "Huh, let me sit with that." And then I realized it was anxiety, but I'd had it my whole life. I just didn't notice because that's how both my parents were. So I thought that was a normal way that everyone just is.
Yeah, same, 100%.
Yeah. How do you think becoming a mom specifically to a daughter has like been compared to how it would be to a son? Because like I know that you focus on working with women, and I know that the mother wound is different for daughters versus sons.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it is. And so I have a son. So I have a son as well. He's my youngest and my daughter's my eldest. So I do have one of each. And my experience with it's been very different with both of them. And I'm somebody that very, very much seeks the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And having I've had to be really kind of honest with myself, and it's been really confronting just how different it has felt for me. And the more that I've kind of acknowledged that within myself, the more that I do see the differences. I was actually having this conversation with a friend a few weeks ago, and I said something to her. She had an and a daughter, and I said, for me, if I was to kind of consolidate it down to how it's felt for me, it's almost like my daughter shines a light on the parts of me that I find quite difficult to love, the parts of me that I've disowned, and the parts that I've kind of suppressed, the parts that it was never safe to kind of embody. And my
Yeah.
son shines a light on the parts of me that I do like. So kind of
Yeah.
naturally how I've shown up with both of my children has been different. It's taken a lot of awareness and a lot of work
Mm-hmm.
around that.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, yeah. And it's confronting, especially my daughter's my first, so she's
Yeah.
the eldest, and I'm very aware. I don't know what your experience is. I'm the eldest daughter.
Yes, so am I.
So I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I feel like it's a double whammy. And I'm very aware that, my daughter is in that position as well. And if I'm completely honest, I have noticed how, especially in the beginning, because my journey really began when I fell pregnant with Neve. That
Mm-hmm.
was when I started to kind of see the relationship with my mother for kind of what it was.
Yeah.
And it was very hard to kind of avoid it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's been incredibly confronting for
Yeah.
me.
What's interesting about how you said with your daughter, how raising her shined lights on parts of yourself that you didn't feel safe to embody and safe to love, is I recently learned in like my own journey towards becoming a coach is what happens in our family of origin is the parts of ourself that are not celebrated, whether it's from our mother or father or whoever, grandparent, any caretaker, the parts of us that are not celebrated, we learn that that's not okay because we're so young and like our survival depends on being loved and accepted. And the parts of us that are not celebrated, we suppress those down for so long that we forget that like that was even a part of our personality. And I think that's why realizing we have a mother wound and working on it, we start to like uncover these parts of like what we're interested in, what we like, what we value that we didn't even know about before. It's almost like when we have this mother wound, we grow up like without a sense of identity. And I know that's not necessarily a question, but I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Oh, I have so much to say on that. Yeah. And I love to tell stories and I love to use real life examples. And as you're speaking, something that I'm like going through right now, which I think is so tied into this, is, and this is true for a lot of women that have quite a prominent mother wound, is usually there is an element of um, there's usually an unhealthy relationship to our body and unhealthy relationship to food. And for
Yes,
me,
for sure.
it's been really, yeah, it's been so prominent in my life. And as you're talking at the moment, I'm kind of going through this process where, so every time that I decide I want to live healthier, so no one will know this listening probably, but in January, so where are we at now? It's April. So three
April.
months ago, I had to have emergent, yeah, April. Gosh, how's it April already?
I
I
know,
had to have
right? And
emergency
it's April
surgery.
23rd. It's
Yeah,
almost May.
I know. It's always like it's tourist season, baby. Um, I had to have emergency surgery to have my gallbladder removed. And it's really
Oh,
kind of
wow.
kick-started this health. Like, my priority and my focus right now is I want to feel healthy. I want to feel strong in my body. And there's a real kind of physical healing that's taking place. And this has been like my relationship to my body. I have a point with this. My relationship to my body has been a really a difficult one, which
Yeah.
I know is very rooted in the relationship to my mother and just how she related to her body. And you know, what I witnessed and what she taught me and all of those things. And I have always, and you let me know if you relate to this, but I've always like done like going to the gym, doing this to get my to feel good in my skin. And I kind of get to this point where I'll feel amazing. I'll be seeing results. I'll be just feeling so much better. And then I will find a way to sabotage myself.
Yeah, you stop going because you're like, I'm fixed now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really kind of going through this now because I'm at that point now.
Yeah.
And there's just this kind of ceiling that we bump up against where it's like I'm not feeling as safe now. And I know for me, my experience with my mum is there was an element of jealousy there, and you see this a lot with the mother wound, you know,
Yes.
the daughter, which is why the mother-daughter relationship is different, because the daughter tends to remind the mother of all of her unlived potential. And if the mother is not
Yeah.
aware of this, she'll be projecting that onto her
Yeah.
daughter. And that was definitely my experience. So to kind of have my dream body, if you will, to make a point, it feels really unsafe for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that.
Um, and that's, yeah, yeah. And like and you see this all the time, don't you? You know, it's like even at one point I tried to tell myself I just don't like the gym, like that's just not me. And I really encourage people to get curious about that, because it's back to what you just said about identity, to
Hmm.
loop this back round. We adopt these identities of that's just not me.
Yes.
I don't enjoy this, and we never really ask ourselves why, and we never go a level, even 10 levels deeper than that, as to why. And usually it's because we don't feel safe, because it's never been safe to kind of take up space in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you've learned that, like, if I do feel good in my body and I do have my dream body, something bad is going to happen.
Mm.
You know, something, somebody is going to be upset with me that I look better than her
Yeah.
or something like that because
Mm.
of that
Mm.
competition element that we learn. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm talking so much about what's really alive for me right now is visibility. It's, you know,
Hmm.
I, especially in relationships, you know, we want to be seen more than anything else
Yes.
in this world, but the reality is often terrified to be seen, and we're actually terrified to be visible
Yes. And
without
I,
realizing it.
yeah, it's wild how like unconscious it is. And on that thread, I would love to know your thoughts on like how you have seen, maybe with your clients and with yourself, how the mother wound affects sexuality and how we show up in the bedroom. Because that's a big one, you know, when we don't feel,
It's a really big one.
when we're not accepting our bodies, like for me at least, the way I went into my own like journey of sexuality from the first time I had sex, it was like my worthiness and what I had to offer was like my body rather than like my body being mine. And like
Mm.
this is my temple and like I get to set the boundaries. Like there was none of that existed when I started dating for the first time. And I'm 100% sure that's tied to the mother wound for sure. And yeah, I would love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on your journey around that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm still on that journey, very, very, very much so. But this has been something that like I I had some big realizations about this a couple of years ago, and I know for me, very, very similar to you, I honestly really didn't like myself
Mm,
for most of my life.
yeah.
That there was a level of, you know, contempt really for myself, and just I was anywhere else but in my body for most
Mm,
of my life.
mm,
And I know when it came to men, and sex and, just sexuality as a whole, it was definitely for the other person and never for me.
Hmm.
Um, as a chronic people pleaser, it was, what can I do, or how can I be, and how can I act so that you value me,
Yeah.
rather than what do I want, what do I need, and what do I value. It was never that. It was never about that.
Yeah. And when a woman comes to sexuality like that, with like, how can I please you? What can I do? Like, there's so much energy in the head. Like, it's just ends up being like overthinking, and we're not actually dropped into our bodies. And like, there's no way an orgasm is happening from that like mindset if you're going into sex like that. And it's
No,
also,
no. I remember.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I
There's a
just think
little
there's
bit
a
of a
tiny bit, so
lag.
I'm like, yeah, I'm really trying to just not interrupt you. And I was just going to say, I don't know if I remember about 3 years ago, I went and had some tantric body work done.
Ooh.
And that was such an incredible experience. And it was one of the first times that I realized just how much I disassociate from my body and how unsafe
Hmm.
pleasure has always felt for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I don't know about you, but pain has always felt quite in a weird way. It's always felt quite comforting to me.
Exactly.
Like
I can
I've always
agree.
found it,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
normal.
I've
It's
always
like,
found
oh,
it,
this is how life is.
yeah, 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 yeah. But pleasure,
It's
completely
dangerous.
different kettle of fish.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally agree, and relate, especially like I always used to joke I was born with a crayon in my hand. Like I always drew when I was a kid. And especially when I was a teenager, I felt like my pain was such a source of like inspiration, of like a material to pull from to make art. And so, yeah, I can definitely relate
Mm,
to you that the pain feels comfortable, because when we have a mother wound, that's like our very earliest memory is like pain is what we're living with. It's because it's
mm.
essentially like an abandonment wound, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then when we have that abandonment wound, I think that adds an extra layer of complexity to sexuality. Um, because how would we be able to show up as ourselves and speak out loud what we want if there's this abandonment wound in the background? And like, if that's in the background, we're trying to prevent being abandoned like in the present moment. So it's like, I'm not gonna say like, I want you to touch me this way, because if you say no, that's like a huge rejection.
100%.
Yeah,
100%. And there's definitely been the pattern in all of my relationships. Me and my
same
husband, we're
here.
in a, yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
We're in a, I've been married 8 years this year. We've been together for 12, and we're in a really interesting kind of place in our relationship at the moment, where I am really beginning to take up space and ask for what I want and for what I need, without feeling like I'm I'm too much, or if
Hmm.
anything. I think the biggest thing for me that's really helped me where this wound is concerned is just really strengthening my resolve that the relationship with myself is the most important thing to me. And
Hmm.
next, obviously, is the relationship to my husband and my children. But knowing that that one with me is solid, that if anything happened, like I would be okay. Because I was always coming from a place of, I don't know what I would do without this person, because my whole self
Yeah.
was kind of wrapped up in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how the mother wound creates like a codependency, because we didn't get that like nurturing and like unconditional support that we needed. So then there's this constant like, oh, I need it from somewhere else. Because I think when we do get it, we learn how to give that to ourselves because we are essentially, you know, like internalizing our parents and caretakers. That ends up being
Mm.
making up our relationship to ourselves. So I love that you bring up that piece about relationship to yourself. And I celebrate you for being on this journey and being able to grow in that with your husband, like alongside. Um, because a lot of times, what I've seen as a relationship coach myself is like when one partner starts to grow, then sometimes the relationship, like they realize it's not aligned because they got together from that space of like, you know how we're like attracted to people who have those complementary kind of like traumas from childhood. So it's
Oh
great
yeah,
when
like the guy
partners,
that,
uh-huh,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say like the guy that is looking for a mother, and you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting about that that role of like playing the mother when we feel like we haven't
Mm,
had that. Like we're like out there doing that for everyone else. Um, for me, even like 3 years ago, I realized that I was doing that in friendship. And
mm,
I was creating like I had a couple of relationships with friends where it was a lot of me showing up for them, which is fine. But then there was no sh that wasn't reciprocated. And
mm,
I had set boundaries with both of them. Like when I realized that, I was, you know, working on my own stuff. And one of them was fine with it and we course corrected. And the other one just did not like that. And we're not friends anymore, which is really sad because we were friends for like 20 years. Um,
mm.
but it's interesting how we end up being that person that we wanted. And then what dynamics that creates.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, because often it's not rooted and it's not centered and it's not coming from a place of I'm rooted in my values and what I
yeah.
want. Usually, like we said, it's coming from a place of I kind of feel like I need to be this way. And often in my experience there's a lot of expectations and unreasonable expectations. How often have you treated somebody how you wanted to be treated and then they don't reciprocate, and
Mhm.
the emotion and the rage and the frustration that that can bring.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also at times, like it's probably easier to show up for other people because it feels scary to
Mm.
have someone show up for you because
Oh,
you're so
that's
used to it.
big.
Yeah. You're so used
Yeah,
to not getting that it's like, okay, I'll show up for them so much that they for like and keep asking them questions about themselves that they forget to ask me how I'm feeling.
yeah. So there's no room
Yeah. Yeah,
for me.
there's no room for me and that feels safe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's absolutely huge. And I see that a lot in relationships. And this was me and my husband to a T, to a
Yeah.
T,
Yeah, I
when we
think
got
that's what I'm
together.
currently going through in my relationship too.
Mm,
A little bit.
it's it like definitely when we met, I was your very typical anxious avoidant. He was very avoidant. We
Hmm.
have had to numerous times deconstruct the
Hmm.
foundations of, well, there was barely a foundation there, to be quite honest, but we've had to deconstruct and rebuild in a way that is aligned. And there has been a couple of points over the past 12 years where we've not been sure that we're going to walk through the door together.
Mm.
And really
Yeah.
learning how to love each other and meet each other in a completely different way. Um, I mean, it's been incredible, but so much hard work and accountability and um, just real compassion and patience,
Hmm.
back to what you said before, it's so common that, and I see this a lot, and again, this was our experience, that one of you will kind of be on this journey, and it's very, very rare that you will both be exactly at the same point on your journeys at the same time.
Yeah, super rare.
And it's so,
Even with
yeah, and
friendships.
it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's so important not to make that mean anything that it isn't. And I know I used to do
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yeah, I used to do that too. I used to judge my partners and be like, oh, they're not doing the work.
Mm, mm, yeah, that'll get you.
hmm So what do you think was the like defining factor for you and your husband to be able to w walk through the door together on in those moments where you weren't so sure that that would happen?
Everything like we had a fight the other morning. It was a small fight, but conflict, it
Yeah.
happens. And I remember just like leaving the house as you do, like I need space. I don't want to talk right now. And I was sitting there and I was really kind of thinking about this. And I think this is to your point of defining moment. I really chose to, I always choose love. And I know that almost sounds a bit cringy as I'm saying it, but I, it was very easy for me to, and you see this a lot with the mother wound. This is one of the ways that it manifests, is we like to other people,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
especially when we are so afraid of being abandoned. And usually there is a sense of deep loneliness with the mother wound. So let's assume
hmm
that we feel like you feel lonely. It's very easy from that place to other somebody else.
hmm
And when you don't feel deserving of love and deserving of everything that you are receiving from a person, without realizing it, we're wanting to push it away and we're wanting to other the other person. Now, I've done this so much over the past decade with my husband. And when I really began to shift into making decisions and living from a place of love, like I will always choose love. And truth is the greatest expression of that. And that has helped us so, so much. My kind of go-to was, and I think a lot of women will relate to this listening. My kind of go-to was, we'll go find someone else then. We'll leave.
Yeah.
You know the
Yeah.
door. You know where the
Yeah.
door is, like, go.
Because it's
And
easier.
when I
It's
stopped
easier
doing,
to just be like, all right, this isn't working. I'm going to walk away. And
mm,
even when we
well,
when we learn, and do the work not to, those thoughts will still come up. We might not act on them. They'll still
no,
come up and you'll
no,
notice them. You're like, oh,
yeah.
how interesting.
Yeah. It happened to me the other day, you
Yeah.
know? It happened to me the other day. Like my mind immediately went to, what am I going to do? We live in South Africa. Like we're like nomadic. What am I going to do if we're not together? What am I going to do about the kids? And it's just, and I
hmm
say this so often, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because it's not about that never happening. It's about how you relate to those parts of yourself when she's showing up because she's afraid,
Yeah, exactly. It's about you
you know?
mothering that part of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's really being able to observe that, because I never even, to be honest, was able to recognize when that was happening. So it's bringing an awareness to that, and then bringing a really loving curiosity and warmth and compassion, and
hmm
a mother,
hmm
to just bear witness to those parts. And that in itself helps dissolve the shame around the story that it's creating, which is, you're not good enough, and
Yeah.
you better figure out your escape plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you're able to see, like, because you're accepting that part of yourself, I feel like it allows you to be able to see the truth that, like, this
Mm.
person in front of you loves you. They're a safe person. Hopefully, I mean, everyone's situation is different. Um, But when you reject these parts of yourself, I feel like it alters your perception of like what's actually true because you're so focused on
Mm.
avoiding your own pain that you experienced in the past. You're so focused on like avoiding that happening again that it like distorts your like perception of your current reality. It's very fascinating. I find that to be like one of the most fascinating things about
Mm.
being human.
Yeah. It's
So
it's
crazy.
it's mind like I'm just like I'm just fascinated and curious and choosing to remain curious has changed my life. Like I
Yeah.
take nothing. I say this. I'm just trying to think if I had to word this, but like I almost had to remind myself that I couldn't trust myself. And I say that
Mm,
in the context of like these thoughts would come in and I would have these very convincing stories and narratives.
mm,
And I had to almost remind myself we can't quite trust that.
yeah,
Um,
that's interesting.
and like I said, just bringing a curiosity. Yeah. And I just want to tie it back into the mother wound, like what you just said there about our pain, because I think this is huge. And I know that this was very prominent in my relationship with my mum, and I see this like across the board with mothers and daughters and sons. But you will trigger your mum because that's what we are here to do, trigger our parents.
Yeah.
And my kids do it to me all the damn time. And the pain that you are feeling is coming from within you. But often what happens is we think the pain is coming from the person that's just done something. We believe that they are causing us pain when actually
Mm,
that pain is coming from within. And often what happens is we don't
mm,
recognize that and we're projecting that back, like, well, you've done this and you've made me feel this way.
yeah, that is a huge one because when we
And
realize
that's
it's
not
coming from
necessarily true.
ourselves, yeah, it's not necessarily true. When we realize the pain is coming from ourselves, at least in my experience, it's helped me have so much more compassion for my mom. And
Mm,
I remember you had a women's circle for Mother's Day in the UK recently. And
mm,
like it's reminding me of the share I had in there where I was talking about, or maybe I think it was actually when we connected it with this podcast, I was telling you that like I realized I was so busy being like angry at my mom that I forgot that I love her like so much and like my
mm,
own anger and being like, you did this to me, like distracted me from that love. And
mm,
just because we love someone, by the way, doesn't mean that how they treat us is like okay. Like we can still put up boundaries, we can still keep our distance. Like currently, I'm not speaking to my mom at the moment. Um, I don't call her and I don't like ignore her calls, but she doesn't call me because I trigger her. I know that
and
I
there
trigger her.
and there's the big difference between triggers and abuse,
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
right?
Yeah. And it's also, I think being in a relationship with a safe person that like you can feel very seen and loved by, I think is such a underrated kind of like pillar of support with the mother wound because you have like a witness. Um, like for
Mm,
example, I'm thinking of a very specific instance of one of the times that my mom visited. And I was already engaged to my husband. We weren't married yet. But it was the first time it was just me, my husband, and my mom, like alone. And he witnessed like how she would talk to me and like how I would shut down and as soon as we were alone in the room, like she like left to go do something, he's like, I don't like how she treats you. And I was like, thank you so much for saying that because I feel like shit right now. I'm like, it feels good to like have someone validate that. Which is why I love your
Mm.
your Instagram as well. Like when the more people talk about it and just normalize it, and it's like I understand how you feel. I think with the mother wound, it's like specifically important because mothers are put on a pedestal in our society. It's like you can't say anything bad about her because she's the reason you even exist on this planet.
Yeah, which is just the stupidest thing.
Yeah.
It's just the stupidest thing, but it's the reality, and it was one of my biggest barriers to healing for the longest time. You know, you feel
Yeah.
like the biggest bitch for even having these feelings because everything is
Yeah. You
telling
feel like
you
such a
that
horrible
you,
person.
yeah, and it takes time to really kind of break through that. But you are 100% right. Finding somebody, because the mother wound is a relational wound, and this is a really important thing to note, is a relational wound. And often what happens is we're trying to heal a relational wound in isolation, and it just simply does not
Hmm.
work.
Hmm.
You know, you healing it in a relationship with somebody else that can witness you and can hold space for you and can say, you know what, that wasn't okay. And how you feel is valid is absolutely fundamental for healing
Yeah.
the mother wound.
Yeah. I have like tears of happiness in my eyes right now as you say
Oh,
that. I love that. So, for people who are listening who maybe want to do a practice or maybe answer a certain journal question or take some little step right now as they're listening towards healing the mother wound, what would you offer them?
ooh, good question. Um, I think one of the most important places to start is really, I believe you've really got to start with recognizing what you didn't have, with recognizing what you needed and you didn't receive, is
Hmm.
kind of the first step to really kind of understanding what the gap is, because there is a gap and we're trying to fill that gap with patterns and behaviors to try and get that love and acceptance and belonging that we didn't necessarily have. So
Hmm.
recognizing what your gap is, I believe, is one of the first steps to recognizing it. So a really simple kind of question would be, what did I need that I didn't receive?
Hmm.
So for me,
Yeah.
it was really just a witness. There was never a how are you? How are you feeling? Like, tell me more about that. Like, there was never any sort of validation for, especially my emotions, the more kind of negatively perceived emotions. Um,
Hmm.
so one thing that I've really struggled with, and I know this is true for most women, is anger. I
Hmm.
was just, you know, any sort of kind of anger, I was just labeled an angry person. I need to go calm down.
Yeah.
So I had a really big gap there. And a lot of women with the mother wound, whenever I say the word nourishment, I mean, go, oh my gosh, why do I feel so drawn to that word? And
Hmm.
there's usually a real lack of nourishment.
Hmm. Yeah.
I like to use the metaphor a lot. Like, we're great at planting seeds, we're great at watering seeds, we're great at nourishing other people. But when that plant grows and the fruit blooms and you've got that gorgeous like strawberry, the first thing a woman will do is she'll pick it and she'll give it to somebody else.
Whoa. Yeah. Wow.
So I'd for anybody listening, if you do resonate with that, what does nourishment really feel like for you? Like, what would that look like for you? Usually we kind of lean into what sounds nice or what other people are doing and never really actually what we need.
Yeah. Or what we
But
think
to
we
know
should
what
be
you need,
doing.
absolutely. But to know what you need to be really honest about what you never received.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so hard to get there because like part of the mother wound is like taking on this narrative of like being the quote unquote good girl
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
we're just kind of like trained to act a certain way to be accepted by our mom. Um,
Yeah.
and at least for me, like I very much resonate with what you shared about like lacking a witness and emotional needs not being met. And for me, that was so hard to admit because I had other, like all my physical needs were met. We lived in a nice neighborhood, went to good schools, always had food, always had clothes, went on vacations. And, especially as an adult, I realized like how expensive all that is. And it's like, you feel like such an ungrateful bitch for being like, but no one cared about my feelings. When really, like, we are emotional beings, though. And it's been said in like a lot of trauma books that like emotional wounds is actually a lot harder to heal from than like physical wounds. Like if you're like physically beaten every day versus like physically just screamed at and berated every day, it's a lot harder to
Mhm.
heal from the emotional one because we internalize it. We internalize
Yeah.
those phrases that are being said out loud to us. We internalize like for example, when no one's showing up to mirror us, we internalize like, oh, I'm not worthy of quality time or like I don't matter. That was a big one for me. Um, I could just keep talking.
It's
It's a big
just
topic.
it's just such a it's huge and it's fascinating and it's so needed. Um, so needed. I was just gonna go somewhere then and my thought just poof, it just went out of my head. It'll come back.
Yeah, it'll come back.
It went, it's
It
gone,
went,
it
it's
dissolved.
gone. Bye.
Yeah.
There are a couple questions that I ask every guest, and feel free to answer the question. And if a thought comes like related to what you say, or if the thought that floated away just came back, like feel free to weave that in.
Okay.
So the
Okay.
first question is, what does self-love mean to you?
Oh, um, my first kind of thought is doing the really hard thing,
Mm,
honestly. Um, self-love to me is
mm,
radical honesty with yourself. I know that when I have done that is when I have felt the most proud of myself, the most connected to myself. And usually, it's doing the thing, especially, back to what we were saying earlier, when you've lived a life and usually you're living someone else's life, not necessarily your own life.
yeah,
Self-love for me has really been the boundaries. It's been saying no when I want to say yes.
yeah,
It's been doing the thing that I'm like, I really don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this, but I also know that this is going to be good for me.
hmm
Um, and the 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 alone time, the bubble baths, all of those things are incredible too and so needed. But honestly, self-love has been the uncomfortable stuff,
yeah,
the stuff that has stretched me, the stuff that has really kind of moved me into more alignment with what I actually value. And for me, it's truth. Like truth is definitely at the top of what I value the most. And that's really what self-love is for me. Yeah.
I love that. That's not an answer we've heard on the podcast. Everyone has a
Oh,
different,
really?
yeah, everyone has a
Oh,
different
that's cool.
definition. Yeah, I love that. What's cool too is when you think about like doing the hard thing or doing the thing you don't want to in terms of like mothering, um, I immediately think of like a 2-year-old who doesn't want to brush their teeth or doesn't want to go to bed at a certain time, but it's like the mother is there to be like, I know you don't have to do it, but you need to for your own health, like so you don't get cavities. It's like that same thing that self-love is like showing up for ourselves and like I know you don't want to do this, but it's for your benefit. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I thought of when you shared that.
Yeah, but that's exactly kind of what it's, it's like, I don't want to go to the gym today. I don't want to work out. And it's like, you, like, I know that I feel my best self and I feel really good about myself when I'm doing the things that I know I need to do to
hmm
really be connected to myself.
hmm
And I don't always want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also feels really good
Uh,
when those parts do come up of like, I don't want to go to the gym, to take a minute to be like, I hear you. I hear that you don't want to go to the gym. Like, what do you need? Do you want to cry for 5 minutes before we go to the gym and then we'll go? Like, what do you need from me for like I have this much
yeah,
time before we need to leave. Like, what do you need?
yeah, yeah,
Rather
exactly.
than
And
just
that to me
parading
is just,
through.
yeah, it's like, yeah, and it's just it's so loving. It's
hmm
so loving. Something that I used to do, and really healing my mother wound has been very directly correlated to healing my relationship with authority. Because one thing I used to do, because you know, I grew up with a couple of parents that, they were doing their best with what they had, but it was very authoritarian and much like you're doing this, and there was little room.
hmm
So what happened with me is the way that I related to myself is there was lots of free passes.
mm
Um, I would give myself a million free passes. My relationship to authority just kind of wasn't there because, to be honest, I thought authority meant a bully, being a bully, and I didn't want to be a
Yeah,
bully, so I just went the opposite way. And I see this a lot. So
that makes
for
sense.
me, it really has been about yeah, cultivating this inner mother that's loving but firm.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice balance there. I can definitely relate to that.
Mm.
So the next question is what makes you feel the most grounded?
Oh, I like these. Cacao.
I put some cacao in my coffee
Being
today.
barefoot.
Ooh,
Oh,
yes.
I love cacao. Be wherever I can. But stillness, stillness and silence,
hmm
honestly. My life has been chaotic, it's been loud. There has not been a lot of space and room for me to really hear and listen.
Mm,
And I've not created that. For me, I I factor in a lot of stillness and silence into my life. And that really, really helps me feel grounded.
hmm
And just doing things that I love, being around people that I love, that energize me, that make me feel good about myself. Um, yeah, just very, I feel like it's a boring answer, but just very simple things like simplicity,
Yeah.
and not a lot of noise and unnecessary shit.
hmm And for the other
And
moms in the
mushrooms.
room, and mushrooms. I love that.
Sprinkle some mushrooms in there, always helps.
It does. For the other moms in the room, how do you factor
Mhm.
in that time of stillness and alone time? Because I know that's something very difficult to do as a mom.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. This has really been a work in progress. It's so much easier for me to take up that space now and ask for what I need and then take it.
hmm
So it really boundaries. So just little things like, so logistical things like I don't do the morning school run. My
Nice.
husband gets up and takes the kids to school in the morning.
Nice.
I pick them up.
Okay.
So I will have time in the morning and I will literally just sit there. I will be silent. Often, I stay in my room, they go to school, and I don't speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of stillness in the morning. Um, I go away. I spend time away from my family and I go and have alone time. So
Mm-hmm.
me and my husband, about probably on average, both of us will take three kind of separate occasions every year where we'll have 2 to 3 days alone and we'll go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we travel, we're a full-time traveling family, and wherever we are in the world, I take that. I take that
Nice.
time. That's been
I love that.
really crucial for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm sure working on your own mother wound helps you do that because you get to a place of like, I'm worthy and deserving of taking this time for myself. It's for a lot of moms. I mean, I'm speaking as someone who just has a bunch of friends who have kids. I don't have kids yet. For a lot of moms, they feel like guilty taking that space for themselves because they're not with their kids or they're not with their
Yeah,
family. When, from my perspective, again, as someone who does not have kids, I think it's actually something you um, kind of like indirectly are doing for your kids and for your family because you're showing up more whole. You're not like running
absolutely.
on empty.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say something here, and this will likely be quite triggering, but I used to do that. And my mum used to do that. And my
Mm-hmm.
grandma used to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get really honest with myself about how I was being a martyr.
Mm, yes.
Because that's something we like to do as mothers, whether we like to admit that to ourselves or not. The truth is, usually there is an element of martyrdom, there is
Mm,
an element of resentment there. And when you really begin to kind of realize the cost of that, you have no choice but to do it. There's no such thing as suffering in silence. It doesn't fucking exist. And that really annoys me when I hear that. But that was something that I used to believe. I used to
yeah.
believe that I was doing a really good job of holding it in and no one could really, I've got this. And it's that kind of martyry. As I'm telling you now, I mean, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but I'll try not to. But women, especially mothers, it's a lot easier to bond over this is really shit. It's really hard. My husband didn't do this. My kids are driving me mad. I need time away. I'm exhausted. Over, actually, I don't do that. And, I do take up my space and I actually don't feel guilty. Most mothers don't feel as guilty as they think that they feel. They just kind of like how that sounds.
Mm, mm, that's good to know. I'm grateful to know that before I have kids and make mom friends.
You just you just have to create new evidence. You
Yeah.
have to create new evidence. Now I have done this and this is part of our life as a family.
Hmm.
Mummy takes time for herself. My kids know that. My kids encourage that because they know and they've experienced me. And
Hmm.
it's just creating new evidence that it's safe and you can take up that space and nothing bad is going to happen. And this incredible life and family that you have isn't going to fall apart because that's usually the biggest
Yeah.
fear. It's fear of loss. It's like, if
Yeah.
I do this, then I'm going to lose it.
And what a great example you're showing your kids that like as a parent, as an adult, as a person, like you take care of yourself by taking time away and you're worthy of that. Like your kids are going to like kids emulate what the adults around them are doing. So your daughter is going
Yeah.
to hopefully also take her own space for herself if she ends up having kids one day in the future.
Yeah. It's going to be a damn sight easier for her to do that. I hope.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
she
because
does
she's
it
seeing
already.
the
She's almost
example.
10. And yeah,
Oh,
even now she's like, Mummy, I'm going to go up to my room and I'm going to take some. And I'm like,
I love
tell me
it.
what you need.
I
We
love
keep the
that.
door, you know, and it's just, it's normal. It's normalized. And
Yeah.
I love that. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's how I take care of them by taking care of me.
Hmm.
And it's not just liking how that sounds, but actually moving through the discomfort of, I feel like a really shit mum right now. And, you know,
Hmm.
it gets easier, it gets better.
Hmm. The last question, before we ask about where people can find you, is my favorite question. And it's, what is your favorite part about being a woman?
Wow, what a great question. Okay. People usually get this stumped at this question. What's
Yeah.
my favorite
Yeah, this
part?
this happens. People are like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting you to ask me that."
I I love the I love I'm trying not to use like a really cliche answer, but like words that come into me are like power. Like I love the the power and the mystery that is the feminine.
Hmm.
I love the depth. I love the chaos. I love the messiness. And they are things that I never thought that I would say. Um, I love the way that we can empower and inspire. Like that's something that I'm really stepping into at the moment, especially in my relationship. And it's, yeah, wow, wow, I'm actually stumped. Yeah, I don't even know if that was I don't know that was a full answer. I don't think it was.
Yeah. Well, if you want to journal on that question and share with me
And
in
then
an
we write it in
email, and
the
then
we
I
write
can
it in the
record
show
a little
notes.
thing, and yeah, yeah, and I can be like, by the way, here's an update.
Yeah, 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 I'm gonna really think about that one. But yeah, like mystery
Yeah.
and like the multi-dimensional kind of
Hmm.
I'm gonna think about that.
Hmm. I could sense a little bit of
But
a
I loved it.
flavor of
I
what you're
love being a
sharing.
woman. Yeah, I love being a woman. And that's not something that I ever truly loved. So that's pretty
Yes,
cool.
I relate. I always thought it was a
Yeah.
burden to be a
Yeah.
girl when I was a kid.
Mm,
So
mm,
I
I
was like
can
a
relate.
tomboy because of that.
Mm,
And now like I would not have it any other way.
no, no, same, same. I really love it, but it's just kind of, yeah, like I think I was always kind of really afraid of, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I always knew that I was very powerful in a way that a man is different. It's like a feminine power. It's I always felt that and I was always very afraid of that. And now I'm kind of really tapping into that and learning how to be with it and move with it. And it's it's really changing my life in the most incredible ways. And that's
Yes.
something that I love about being a woman because we can see things and tap into things and frequencies that, you know, men just don't get to.
Hmm.
And it's not an either or good or bad, it's just different.
Hmm. Yeah. I also do think some men maybe can tap into that. It's just very rare,
Mm,
I think. I've come across a handful of men who have like very deep intuition and
mm,
because the feminine qualities exist in everyone, no matter like
yeah.
what your gender is. But I think collectively there has been a fear of the power of the feminine collectively, and that's why
Mm,
patriarchy
oh, yeah.
exists, which we can go off on a whole different conversation right now about that.
It's the creation element of being a woman, I think.
Yeah.
Like our ability to kind of create and that life force. I think when I think about power, it's the life force that I think I've always felt a little bit afraid of.
Mm. Yeah.
Because that feels huge.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like now I want a baby, but I don't think it's necessarily a baby that I want. It's that feeling I'm getting. It's just something wants to be birthed, like something
Yeah.
wants to come through me and be created, and that's really cool and exciting. And I'm kind of playing around with that.
Yeah.
Plus,
Well,
it's fun to dress up and, you know.
yeah, we have so much more variety when it comes to, I mean, anyone could wear anything, but we have so much more variety without judgment typically in the Western world to
Mm.
wear pants and skirts and dresses and shorts and yeah,
Mm.
yeah. I think those boundaries are kind of being pushed a little bit, depending on where you are in the world. Like in New York City,
Yeah,
for example, you can walk around and see a man in a skirt. It's like a normal everyday occurrence now in 2024.
I love that.
Yeah, I love it
I
too.
love that.
Um, so for everyone listening who is tuned in, where can they find you online? And if there's any like freebie or anything that you will be sharing for the show notes, feel free to share about that as well.
Oh, okay, cool. So, yeah, the best place to find me is usually Instagram or TikTok, and I have the same handle for both. I am Michaila Tyson. I'm sure you'll pop it in the show notes.
Yes.
But I'm actually in the process of putting something together, predominantly for mothers who have daughters.
Ooh, yeah.
Um, and yeah, that's where you can find me right now.
Is there a name for what you're putting together, or is it still in is this what you're birthing?
I've not figured it out yet. I've not
Okay.
figured it out yet, but it's coming.
Okay. So this might be the baby you were
And I
talking
have
about.
maybe. I'm actually I've been asked to do this for years and years, but I'm
Hmm.
as of doing my own podcast, which I'm very excited about. So
Ooh.
hopefully that is coming in May, towards the end of May. So keep your eyes, ears rather peeled for that. I'm
All right.
excited.
Very nice. Thank you so much for chatting with me today. I wish we had like more hours
Oh,
and
thank
hours
you.
of time.
I know it goes so fast.
It does. It really does.